and regions of the United States. We are thus witnessing a negrification, an interbreeding and a decline of the white race in the face of more prolific inferior races. Naturally, from the democratic point of view, there is no harm in all this, on the contrary. The zeal and intransigence of those American agitators of racial integration is well known and can but only further reinforce this phenomenon. Moreover, not only are these last not content with advocating total racial promiscuity and demanding that Negroes have free access to all public and political office, so much so that we may one day expect to see a black president of the United States, but also they see no harm in the fact that blacks mix their blood with that of people of their own white race. A typical example of this propaganda is the drama Roots, implying the roots of racial prejudice, which Italian radio has seen fit to foist upon us on a number of occasions. We know that the integrationists who draw these conclusions from the dogma of egalitarian democracy, as logical and as aberrant as they are partisans of a regime of genuine imposition, even though they speak of freedom about anything and everything. Opposing them still, especially in the southern states, are certain groups who are fighting against the advancement of the black race and the negrification of their country. But these groups are unaware of the extent of the phenomenon, of which they only see the most material and most tangible aspects. They do not see to what extent America is not only negrified on the demographic and racial plane, but also, and especially, on the plane of culture, civilization, of behavior, of taste, even where interbreeding with Negro blood properly speaking is not present. The United States of America has been compared, with good reason, to a melting pot. America is, in fact, one of those cases where, from an extremely heterogeneous raw material emerges a type of man whose characteristics are, by and large, uniform and constant. Men of the most diverse peoples thus receive, by settling in America, the same imprint. It is almost always the case that, after 2 generations, they have lost their original characteristics and reproduce a fairly unitary type, as far as the mentality, sensitivity, and modes of behavior are concerned, to wit, the American type. However, in this precise case, theories such as those formulated by Frobenius and Spengler, that there is a close relationship between the forms of a civilization and a kind of soul linked to the natural environment, the scenery, and to the original population, do not seem relevant. If this were the case, in America, the element composed of American Indians, the Redskins, ought to have played an important role. The Redskins were a proud race, possessed style, dignity, sensitivity, and religiosity. It is not without reason that a traditionalist author, F. Schoen, has spoken of the presence in them of something aquiline and solar. And we do not hesitate to affirm that had their spirit marked, under its best aspects and on an adequate level, the mix of material in the American melting pot, the level of American civilization would probably have been higher. However, setting aside the Puritan and Protestant element, itself under the effect of negative, Judaizing influences due to the fetishistic insistence on the Old Testament, it would seem that it is the black element, with its primitivism, that sets the tone of many of the decisive traits of the American mentality. One first thing is, in itself, characteristic. When one speaks of folklore in America, it is always the blacks who spring to mind, as though they were the first inhabitants of the country. So much so that, in America, the famous Porgy and Bess, by the Jewish musician Gershwin, is considered a classic work inspired by American folklore, a work which deals only with Negroes. The author furthermore declared that, in order to write his work, he had to immerse himself for a time in the atmosphere of black Americans. The phenomenon represented by easy-listening music and dance is even more conspicuous. We cannot say that Fitzgerald is wrong when he notes that, under one of its principal aspects, American civilization can be called a jazz civilization, that is, of a music and dance of black or negrified origin. In this domain, very singular, elective affinities have brought America, through a process of regression and of return to the primitive, to inspire itself precisely from the Negroes, as though, in its search for frenetic rhythms and forms as a possible justifiable compensation for the soulless nature of mechanic and material modern civilization, numerous European sources could not have offered something much better. We have elsewhere referred to the dance rhythms of southeastern Europe. which really have something Dionysiac about them. But America has made its choice, on the basis of the Negroes and Afro-Cuban rhythms, and the infection, from there on, has steadily spread to many other countries. The psychoanalyst C.G. Jung has already remarked on the Negro element of the American psyche. Some of his observations deserve to be reproduced here.
Another thing that struck me, in the American, was the great influence of the Negro, a psychological influence naturally, not due to the mixing of blood.